Hello, this is Dale, the librarian at the Marriott Library. I wanted to show you how to find scholarly sources, give you a few simple rules. When you use them all together, can give you the criteria to help you find the best sources, even if you don't need a scholarly source, and how to avoid finding bad or fake ones at the same time. So, librarian rule number one, we want to know what is the purpose of the source. Why was it created? Why does it exist? And I want to show you some websites. The first one, the easiest one to find out there, is if somebody wants to sell you something or make some money. There's a lot of websites that are very open about this, but it's good to know that the purpose of a website first when you're looking at it. Another one is they might be online or it might be printed or however it shakes out to persuade you. I think in a political sense, like at this website, they would be very upfront that they want to inform you, but they also are interested in maybe changing your mind. People are typically open about this, but sometimes you'll find people who are trying to hide under the guise of trying to just inform you in an unbiased way. So you have to be careful about the political stuff. Another big one is to entertain. And this is a great purpose of the internet, isn't it? When we get bored, we just want to cruise the internet and look for interesting things. So People Magazine, this is a staple of grocery store checkout lines. And its sole purpose is, I would say, to entertain. It's kind of a break from life. This is a tricky one. When you get into the level of scholarly articles, now a newspaper is not scholarly, but the purpose is the same as scholarship, I would argue, and the purpose is to inform. They are here to give you information about a variety of different things, in this case, the Salt Lake Tribune, in an unbiased way. There's journalistic integrity, and there's editorial moments that you get to interpret. What's the reputation of the source that you're choosing to use that calls itself an unbiased information source? This is only one factor, so don't worry if you're getting hung up on this one. Librarian rule number two. So the first one was, what's the purpose of the source? Librarian rule number two is, what is the authority of the author or the creator? Or another way of putting this is, who do they think they are? So who you can be, let me go on to Cindy First, Dr. First here. Who you are can be just as important as what you have to say. In fact, it backs up a lot of things that we do in academia. How do we determine their authority and reputation quickly? This is the easiest thing that you can do, and oftentimes people will put this out there, is what's their education? What are the letters after their name? So in this case, PhD in electrical engineering, that Dr. First has a great deal of credibility after just seeing those very things without going through the rest of her information. It's very easy to tell. Another one that you would check for the authority of somebody is, who do they work for? So if you have a scientist or an engineer or a political scientist, a policy person that works for the Department of Energy, how you feel about them might be different than how you feel about somebody who's working in a private industry. Both of their opinions are valid, but it's something that you need to be aware of. And who do they necessarily represent? Another one is, do they represent a larger group of people? So maybe they're great and they work in a particular position, but do they represent a larger group? So an association like this has a lot of policy sway in the United States and in the world, I would argue. So it's very important. Do they represent a larger organization, or do they just work there? So this is one of those moments that you would want to negotiate. One very important one that I do not want to dismiss is, it's not all about education. It's a lot about experience. So if you have somebody who says, I've been working in the pizza industry for 22 years, their opinion is going to be valid, even if they only got a bachelor's degree or a high school degree or whatever. I think their experience is oftentimes discounted. In this case, we have LeBron James. So if you have somebody who's a professional basketball player, who's won championships and has been part of several teams and been a significant player, that is a huge moment of authority, and you can rely on what they have to say in that particular moment. You have to beware if LeBron James all of a sudden is advocating some medical procedure. You have to use your your judgment. Is he qualified as a professional basketball player to talk about this? If it's about knee injuries or exercises, then it's credible. But you have to be careful about that sort of thing. So, librarian rule number 3 is editors. And let's see if I can wend my way over to this other screen. Okay, so for the rule number 3, when you're looking at editors, who is bothering to publish this source? Because they're taking on the risk of the author and what they said, and by publishing it, they're agreeing with it. So if you have something like Reddit is very easy to self-publish in, or if you have Twitter, you can know that the risk was very low because it was somebody that was essentially self-publishing. You can move on up the scale to maybe a local or a regional newspaper, the Idaho Statesman. I'll check out from time to time, see what's going on in Idaho. It's a smaller market, so their editorial might be focused on a particular region. You have to be aware of politics and things going on. There's a lot of things with the region that they don't necessarily have to represent on the national level. But all of a sudden, if you see that hugging chickens increases graduation rates on the cover of the New York Times, then all of a sudden this is like a national or international newspaper. So that's a big deal, isn't it? If they bothered or if they took the risk to put this on there, it means more than if it shows up in Reddit, doesn't it? All of a sudden you get into professional journals. And this is kind of a moment where if you're in a profession, and this one is one that I belong to, the Association of College and Research Libraries. If they publish it, all of a sudden I might be asking, well, why did they bother to publish it? Because they're not representing general interests, but they're focused on academic libraries. So that might throw up more questions about why are they bothering to put in this article about chickens. This one might be a more appropriate find, and this is something geared towards education, and they would have a stake in the graduation rates. But then you move on up to scholarly journals. This is where you have academic folks, PhDs, professors, who are publishing articles that they're furthering the knowledge on a particular topic. So it's very serious, and I'll show you what a scholarly article looks like in just a moment. But even in the scholarly journals, we have moments of which one is more credible than another one, and it's based on reputation. So don't be afraid to think that one journal might be better than another, because there's ways of measuring that. All of a sudden, if it shows up in a highly influential journal that a lot of people are familiar with, the Journal of the American Medical Association, then there's quite a bit of gravity that goes along with this, doesn't it? Because they're representing a broad brush stroke that this represents all of the medical profession at this moment, that we think we should encourage our children to go out and hug chickens. Oh, by the way, I found out that this is not true. This leads on to my next one. What does a scholarly article actually look like? Let's see if I can get back here. A scholarly article, and here, I'm sorry to say, don't hug backyard chickens. Apparently there's a whole bunch of diseases you can get, including salmonella. Isn't that fun? My son was okay. That was a photo that I took. So he did not get salmonella, but we're not going to hug our chickens anymore, although they're so sweet. When you're looking at a scholarly article, the main purpose is to inform. But you're going to notice that on many other websites, there's going to be a lot more decorations. This is kind of sterile, isn't it? The graphic design is intentional because they want to reduce implications of bias on the author. They don't want the author coming forward as somebody who's trying to persuade you or sell something, but they want to come across as being unbiased and just wanting to be part of the dialogue along with other professionals in that field of study. Which you can see all sorts of things that they came from. First of all, you can see their names. That's very critical. There's no such thing as a scholarly article that's anonymous. You can see where they come from. This University of Helsinki shows up here a lot, the Finnish Food Safety Authority. But the cool thing about scholarly articles as well, like I mentioned before, it's part of this scholarly discussion, isn't it? How do we get a hold of these people is often part of the article. There's telephone numbers here, and there's often email addresses. If you find an article that you have questions about, or if you want to ask the author a question, oftentimes these people will write back, and they're thrilled that somebody wants to talk about these things. Not always true, but sometimes true. So if you find something great, write to the author and see what you get. So how do you find a scholarly article Now that we know what it looks like and some of the criteria that we want it to run through, how do we actually find something like that? First and foremost, many of the scholarly resources that we subscribe to at the Marriott Library are licensed, and so they're only available to students, staff, and faculty of the University of Utah, or people who are on campus using our network. If you're off campus and you run stuck and you can't get full text to something, it's asking you for like a fee or something like that, don't pay for the fee. There's a couple of things that you can do. One, you can test the off-campus access. This is where you would log in with your U of U network ID, and then you would prove that you belong to the University of Utah. That would get you in for a lot of the articles. If you're out on the web, this is really effective. You'll get a lot more full text through our licensing. But if you run into something where you just can't get full text, we also have this great feature called interlibrary loans. Many academic libraries have this, so you can cause your library to go out and get an article on your behalf from another institution. It's a great service. When you want to find a scholarly article, I have a couple of places that you can look. USearch, this is the first tab called USearch. USearch looks for our books, but it also looks in some article databases. So if you type in chickens and salmonella, see if I can find that article again, you'll be able to see if there's articles, but there's also books as well. So if you want to get away from or specifically to one particular type of media, down the facets on this side is where you would narrow down. So I would highly recommend looking at books. There's a lot of good stuff that comes out these days, and many of them are ebooks as well. But you can see already we have some of these full text articles. This is not the end-all be-all complete source. Not all of the scholarly articles show up here. Excuse me. Another place to go, research databases. If you're unfamiliar with these, a lot of them are fun to just click on the name and to see what you can find. But I think a good way to go in, if you're unfamiliar with this, is go by subject. When you go by subject, it will generate a list of databases that are supposedly applicable. Some of them are more focused than others, and you might find them not as useful. But it's just a list of databases recommended by that particular subject liaison. In this case, I looked on communication, and this is the database in yellow that shows up at the top that I thought was the easiest point of entry. If you go to any of the other subjects, the librarian in charge of that particular field will have done the same thing. So you can reliably pick the one in yellow if you're just starting out. When you go into any of these databases, it's probably going to be a mishmash of some of the popular things that we'd seen. There's even a lot of newspapers like we had seen. You can get full text to New York Times, for example, mixed in with scholarly articles. So search and remember to track down these things that have this kind of a sterile scholarly look, and you'll be in good shape. If you ever have any questions, just send me let me know and I can help you find out. In some of these databases, there's like a scholarly checkbox. These are not 100% foolproof, so use them at your discretion. They're pretty good. They'll get you in the ballpark, but I would encourage you to search through all of the things that you find in a database for things that you might find useful, and then narrow it down to scholarly afterwards. Thirdly, I want to encourage you to use the Ask the Library. You can always send in an email. When you use this service, it'll be forwarded to the right librarian. So if you have a subject-specific question, you can have in-person consultations. You can do a live chat session online where you're saying, oh, I need to find an article about X and Y, and they'll help you track that down. Another one is subject guides, and this one shows up over here as well. Every librarian has published subject guides on many different topics, and you can find things on large fields of study like communication, or you can narrow down to very specific things. So here's one, finding books in Spanish at the Marriott Library. So you can search for those different topics. The cool thing you can do, though, is, so for example, if I wanted to find the communication librarian, if you find a particular guide or subject that works well with you, the name of the librarian and a photo will be there, so you can track them down. When you're in the communication guide, I have some specific class guides that I've used in teaching opportunities, but these are my favorite databases in yellow. For what it's worth, send me an email if you find this frustrating and you can't get through this in a reasonable amount of time. So like a minute or two, contact me. I am here to help you out. And I think that's all I've got for you. So I hope you have a great semester and thanks for watching.